What's up, members only community? Joey Vantes here. And if you haven't seen in the news already, Max Azarello, the gentleman in New York City who set himself on fire, was seen a couple days prior passing out pamphlets, is what it said right now. I can't declare that yet because there's not any confirming evidence specific to that, but this is what is being alleged at this point. They're saying that he's from Florida and that he went to New York specifically knowing that he was going to do this. He was passing out these pamphlets that he had created to different people, and then eventually had lit himself on fire. They say he's in critical condition, and by the time that you're watching this video, he may have already deceased, but I'll bring you an update on that as soon as I find out those details. But let's read what's inside this pamphlet. And I'll basically preface this whole thing by saying, I'm wondering, and my questioning is, was this a false flag event? And the reason why I suggest that is because you'll see some of the points that he pops out. It's true stuff, right? But it would be genius, and it would almost be predictable of the intelligence agencies right now, the way that they've been operating, to take words and phrases and things that are true, but mix and twist them with somebody who would be considered to be a nutcase, that would do something crazy off his rocker, losing his mind, to be willing to go and light himself on fire to do something like this. But is it possible for somebody to finally come to their end and say, you know what, I can't take it anymore? Yes. So I'm looking at the situation. I think the way we all have to look at it is analyze the data, do a little bit of investigative research, wait a little bit of time, and then make a determination. But let's read some of the pamphlet that he was passing around to see exactly what he was saying in this pamphlet to gain a better understanding. Okay. It starts off the title here, and I'm putting it up on the screen. You should be able to see it depending on where it's placed. It says, "The True History of the World Haunted Carnival Edition." And this is a quote by Bill Casey, 1981. "We'll know our disinformation campaign is complete when everything the American public believes is false or a lie." That was actually a quote that was used in Mike Smith's Out of Shadows documentary. If you haven't seen it, Kevin Shipp, who was an ex-CIA operative, actually voiced this as well and confirmed this. But Bill Casey did say this back in 1981. It says, "An Occupy Returns booklet, our only goal, abolish our criminal government and replace it with one that serves all." And that is from the Constitution. He's just rephrasing it, rewording it a little bit. But the Constitution says that whenever any form of government is destructive to these ends, it's the right of the people to abolish or replace it and institute new government. And while I do agree, I don't believe you can drain the swamp as Trump suggests, but I also don't believe that the Democrats are going to do anything right either. It's a two-party system that, as John Adams says, as soon as two parties were created, that destructive measure divided a country, and we know how divide and conquer works. You divide, then you conquer. As soon as that division was created, the divide just continued to extend out further until eventually we've been able to be conquered, which I believe we are under a coup d'etat. But I will say that the only way forward, in which I believe, is that the current form of government must be completely dismantled and a new form of government must be instituted by the will of the people. And I've already given some suggestions to that, which I'll talk about maybe a little bit more in depth, either on this video or on another one. But let's go to page 2. It says, "Our story starts with fascism, which is a government of con artists and thieves." Don't take my word for it. Here are Hitler's own words. Quoting Hitler here from 1923, it says, "The size of a lie is a definitive factor in causing it to be believed, because the vast masses of a nation are more easily deceived than they are consciously and intentionally bad. They would never credit others with the possibility of such great impudence as the complete reversal of facts." It goes on to say, "It's a totalitarian lie, and fascist leaders know it. They use propaganda to shout lies so loudly over and over again that the masses believe them." Quote, "They are your enemy, which is why you must give us all the power," the fascist lies. Quote again, "Look at how rotten and violent your neighbors have become. We need a strong dictator to make things right," says the power-hungry fascist. He says, "The enemy of the fascist state isn't just the most oppressed groups, it's the entire public. They're sold the lies of democracy, that democracy must be overruled, that they must embrace the fascist violence and total control for their own good. The leaders steal the public's lives and livelihoods, their meaning and purpose, as they shout lies in all directions. A fascist state then, as a totalitarian cult They flip morality on its head, control the flow of information, and tell the public they have no choice but to submit to their charismatic leaders who are bleeding them dry. There were many con artists and thieves who quite liked fascism because it made them ungodly rich. They were all industrialists who profited off of the war machines, the media empires who used the propaganda for theft, and, as the quote on the cover suggests, the Central Intelligence Agency. Page 3 says, World War II and the Holocaust showed the world just how horrific fascism was, slaughtering its own people in death camps and on battlefields. The rotten con of fascism was exposed, and the public wouldn't so easily be duped again. Hitler was defeated, but the vast networks of fascist war profiteers remained, and they yearned for total control. They know the power of the propaganda, so they hatched an evil plan. They wouldn't rush, and they wouldn't call it fascism. Instead, they would slowly, steadily poison culture as they divided the masses against each other and broke their collective spirit until the day they would shatter it completely and throw their people to the wolves. And they would do it all in the name of freedom. After the war, America flourished. The American dream was in full swing as millions joined middle class, as it seemed like a good deal for many. Work hard and you will have a house and a car, prosperity, security, and comfort. But with it came a message of existential fear, a favorite tool of fascists. In 1947, it says, the public was introduced to the doomsday clock. There is a day, the people were told, that the prosperity could evaporate, that we could be annihilated by a nuclear war and societal collapse. Tick-tock, tick-tock went the doomsday clock. And so for those of you who are kind of questioning some of this, like, there is definitely some truth to this, right? We understand that propaganda was heavily used in Nazi Germany. There's also some who suggest that what has played out in the world is done by people who are imposters of certain spiritual and ethnic groups. We'll just leave it at that. We don't want to get banned off of the platforms, but there were some groups who essentially had allowed themselves to be oppressed or overtaken because they couldn't fight back. And thus, there were people in their own ethnic groups who potentially performed some of the mass crimes against them. And these people hijacked their own faith, hijacked their culture, hijacked their ethnicity, if you will, and then use these tactics against their own people. And that is the suggestion that has been, fully put out there in swing. These aren't my words. This is a strong belief. Now, page 4 says, in the 1960s, the U.S. government faced the biggest threat in modern history as dissent grew among the public. The atrocities of the Vietnam War were on full display, and millions questioned why we were sending our young men to kill and die in the jungles on the other side of the world. Now, just to give you a point to this, Jim Morrison's dad, and he may talk about this in these pages, but I'm just going to throw this out there. Jim Morrison was in the Doors, big group in the 60s, 70s era. Jim was said to have never actually touched an instrument, never was a musician, never was a rock star, was a collegiate person, very clean cut. And people knew that his dad was in the Navy, but his actual position was never really publicly displayed until later. Jim went on after his father left off to sea to go do his thing and be part of the Navy. He had moved into this rock and roll world, rock and roll personality, began to actually get a huge rise to fame, coined the Lizard King. That was the name that people gave him. And he was massive on so many levels, right? But what's interesting is, on the day that Jim Morrison died, his dad was giving a speech decommissioning the ship that they used in the Gulf of Tonkin. And he basically said, and put it out there himself, that the Gulf of Tonkin, and for those who don't know, was the act of war which incited the U.S. to go on full-scale war against Vietnam. They said that Vietnam had attacked them, and so they went in and used the Gulf of Tonkin as a means to start war. It was later revealed that the Gulf of Tonkin was a false flag. That means that the U.S. basically lied. Jim Morrison's dad lied about this happening, and this is what incited the whole war. And so people believe that his dad, as a naval or a Navy admiral, was actually also tied in very heavily with the intelligence communities, and that so is Jim. And so a guy who never played music, never did anything like this before, recluse, all of a sudden was out there, became this big rock star and transformed his image, his look, his everything within under a year, and became this big person in this space, died on the same day that his dad decommissioned and divulged all this information about who he really was and what took place. And so they believe that it was a big psyop and that they were actually all tied into the intel communities. But so that's that portion of it. He goes on to say in this, the civil rights movement clamored for radical change as blacks and other minorities were excluded from the promise of the American dream. The hippie movement brought a rejection of modern American thought as leaders and musicians preached pacifism, activism, and revolution. The government assassinated leaders, but they knew that wouldn't be enough. They couldn't just kill people. They needed to kill ideas. To stop the threat of a unified public, they turned to the fascist great weapon, propaganda. As they ravaged the counterculture movements with drugs, they formed and popularized bands as their own to quell dissent, right? So the Grateful Dead, Jerry Garcia, he said, we're not thinking about any kind of struggles. We're not thinking about revolution or war, any of that. Stop with all this radical thought and enjoy the ride, they insisted. There were the Doors. Okay, here he goes. Jim Morrison's father was an admiral in the Gulf of Tonkin incident that kicked off the Vietnam War. And now his son preached alienation and hopelessness with songs like People Are Strange and The End. There were the Beatles who scoffed at revolution, told us to fear the tax man and that happiness is a warm gun, and that the public cheered, that they had no idea that the purpose of all this was not to entertain, but to slowly steer them away from hope and activism and towards something much more sinister. They were brainwashing them. If you've heard about the MK Ultra mind control programs, there was also Operation Midnight Climax. That was also utilizing psychedelics and drugs and mind control to begin to dive into entertainment spaces and music spaces and even pornography and even with prostitutes to get people to get their mind off of what they were thinking about, right? Togetherness, the American dream, working hard, prosperity, peace, safety, security, and making them understand that there's this existential crisis, there's this end coming, something tragic and chaotic that's about to ensue. So I wanted to give you guys an idea of what this is all about, but go and click on the link, read the rest of it on my website. You can also watch the video of what this man did and how this whole situation occurred, where lighting himself on fire, etc. on my website, joeyvantes.com or fightthepsyops.com. Go check it out right now. Drop a comment. And guys, always consider supporting the channel and what we're doing here. If you haven't picked up your emergency preparedness kits that include things like this right here and things like this right here, make sure you do it right now. These medications and whatnot are not available widely in a lot of different places. They're banning this stuff, but this is available right now through my partner, the Wellness Company. Make sure you pick up your kits. Use code Joey. You save $30 off and you get free shipping. Also, guys, new merch up on my website. Support the movement, what we're doing for investigative journalism, our travel fees, IT fees, and all the associated things that we do here because we are fighting for your freedom and your free speech, and we want to wake more people up. Click the link down below in the description or head to joeyvantes.com and do it today. Love you. See you soon.